Welcome to Monday. You are watching CBC News BC. I am Jessica Chung here in the Vancouver newsroom. Okay, let's get you caught up. Thousands of travelers are facing another day of disruptions as Air Canada flight attendants continue to strike despite a federal return to work order. Now, Air Canada says the Canada Industrial Relations Board declared the strike illegal and has ordered the union's leadership to direct its members to return to work. But the union says it's standing with the flight attendants until they're given a fair deal. Now, the union and its members say they're willing to face the consequences.
I believe that we are a united group. We have labor unions across Canada, across the globe supporting us. We know that we are doing what is right, and that at the end of the day, we are going to forge history. It takes some uncomfort, but you know what, Air Canada, we want to be in the skies. If they want to fix this, they can come to the table and negotiate a fair contract.
Now, Air Canada had said it planned to resume flights this evening. It's not clear if that will actually happen. YVR is advising Air Canada passengers to not come to the airport unless they have a confirmed flight. Now, the wildfire burning just south of Port Alberni is still out of control, but fire officials say the Mount Underwood fire is not burning as aggressively as it was last week. And that's due to the recent rain and cooler weather. But crews are keeping an eye out for the warmer and drier conditions expected later this week.
Given the amount of rain that we've received, it would take considerable drying to get back to the point that we were at in terms of fuel dryness and the drought that resulted in this fire igniting and growing so quickly.
Now, the Wildfire Service says the Mount Underwood fire now covers close to 37 square kilometers. And after 50 years, horse racing at Fraser Downs in Surrey has come to an end. And that's because the city ended its lease with the track, a racetrack operator. Now, it's one of the last remaining tracks in BC. And the news is shocking for those in the horse racing community.
It's devastating for them to get the news this way, lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods. It's unbelievable that they could have the rug pulled out from under them in that fashion. To give 90 days notice, that's ridiculous.
Now, the city terminated the lease to start plans for the redevelopment of the Cloverdale Fairgrounds. That's where the track is located. And the redevelopment plan includes housing, a hospital, and other public uses. And staying in Surrey, a community there is experimenting with a new idea. It has introduced a play school inside a seniors care facility. Now, the goal is to promote intergenerational connection, bringing together grandparents, parents, and children under one roof.
We put a smile on the seniors' faces, and we're able to show the children as well that there is a bigger part in the community, not just tiny scholars or not just their families, but we are all part of a bigger community.
Now, along with reuniting families, she says the project is meant to provide intergenerational connections to those who don't have the luxury of being near their loved ones. And that's it for now. I am Jessica Chung, and you are watching CBC News BC. Stay here, don't go anywhere, because BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Air Canada flight attendants say they will ignore an order to return to work. Their national union president says if that means he goes to jail, quote, so be it. That defiance comes after the Federal Labor Relations Board declared that strike illegal. It's grounded hundreds of flights and upended travel plans for thousands of Canadians here and abroad. How is the strike affecting you? And in our second half, a huge number of Sockeye salmon are expected to return to the Fraser River. Why are so many returning? And how should harvesting be handled? I'm Dan Burridge in for Michelle Elliott all this week. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on radio, TV, and on our live stream. You can call us now on our top story. How is the Air Canada flight attendant strike affecting you? Are you trying to catch a different flight? Do you have a loved one whose travel plans are unclear or upended? What do you think ought to happen next? Our number across BC, 1-800-825-5950. Our number in Metro Vancouver is 604-669-3733. You can dial us at pound 690 on your cell. Be hands-free or pulled over, please, if you're driving. Or email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. You can also send a message on our CBC British Columbia TikTok page. As we said, Air Canada flight attendants continue to defy back-to-work orders and remain on the picket lines. This morning, the Canada Industrial Relations Board deemed that strike unlawful and ordered union workers to resume their duties by 9 a.m. CUPE workers, the union Air Canada flight attendants belong to, walked off the job late Friday night. As we said, we want to hear from you. How are you being affected by the job action by Air Canada flight attendants? And what do you make of them defying that back-to-work order? Let's go now to our reporter, Johna, Baylon, who is at YVR. She's been speaking with union members as well as passengers. Johna, thanks for joining us. Flight attendants, as we can see and hear, still on the picket lines, despite being ordered back to work. What is the mood there?
Well, Dan, I would say the mood is really upbeat. As you can see, there's plenty of people still right behind me. Just moments ago, they were cheering pretty loudly, and we're getting really strong energy from the striking Air Canada flight attendants over here, defying the back-to-work order. And I'd say it's been like that all of this morning. When we arrived hours ago, music was playing, and there are a lot of passenger travelers showing their support for the picketing flight attendants, and also drivers like passing by, honking in solidarity. So overall, I'd say the mood is pretty positive. And what are you hearing from union leaders? Yes, so we heard from CUPE National President Mark Hancock earlier, who told reporters that union leaders aren't afraid to go to jail if it means getting the best outcome for their members.
There's no limit. We're going to stay strong. We're going to stay committed to making sure that those workers can do the job that they love doing and actually be able to afford a roof over their heads, to afford caring for their families. And if it means folks like me going to jail, then so be it. If it means our union being fined, then so be it. We're looking for a solution here. Our members want a solution here, but that solution has to be found at a bargaining table.
We also heard from local union leaders representing flight attendants out of YVR.
This is now a movement for labor rights in Canada. No, quite frankly, I believe that we are a united group. We have labor unions across Canada, across the globe, supporting us. We know that we are doing what is right, and that at the end of the day, we are going to forge history. It takes some uncomfort, but you know what, Air Canada, we want to be in the skies. If they want to fix this, they can come to the table and negotiate a fair contract. They have been depending on government intervention from the beginning. It is truly disgusting, distasteful, and it needs to be addressed.
So Dan, that was Air Canada flight attendant and CUPE Local 4094 Interim President Henley Larkin doing a press conference just a short while earlier.
And we can hear and see how loud it is there, Johna, for our audience who's listening online. It's quite loud there, as you can hear, and beeping and honking from drivers and other people. What have you heard from passengers at the airport today?
Well, first of all, it was much quieter over in the airport at the Air Canada terminal. It was relatively calm. We heard from passengers who are traveling for a range of reasons. Some folks returning home after their holiday here in Vancouver, others wanting to be present for loved ones who are undergoing medical emergencies. And we've heard some of them say they're pretty understanding of what's going on. They're hopeful they'll get their flights rebooked. We also saw some folks who are pretty upset at what's going on, and so that's what folks are looking forward to today, hoping they'll get their flights rebooked. We also heard from YVR that since Friday, a total of about 659 flights have been canceled. Dan?
All right. Johna Baylon, a reporter with CBC BC, live outside YVR, very loud YVR. Johna, thank you very much for joining us. As we said, our top story today, Air Canada flight attendants remain behind picket lines this afternoon, defying that return to work order from the Canada Industrial Labour Relations Board. We already have some calls coming in. We're going to get to those in just a moment. Hang on the line. Let's go to our guest now. Joining us is John-Henry Harter. He is a labor studies lecturer at SFU. John, thanks very much for joining us. What do you make of what has transpired over the weekend and now into the morning with this defiance by the flight attendants?
Oh, wow. Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me. That's the big question. What I make of it really is what I heard the QP president and the interim president, the flight attendant, say just a minute ago, is that it really is a fight for workers' rights, and the right that we've won, that's been declared by the Supreme Court, charter right to freely collectively bargain, and the right to strike. So that's what's on the line, because every time something like this happens, lately, and I mean over the past couple of years, the Liberal government either threatens to or does order the workers back to work, binding arbitration, invoking Section 107.
Let's go to the calls now. Lynn is joining us from Victoria. Lynn, what do you make of what's happening with the flight attendants in Air Canada?
I have a ticket out to London, England, September 4th. However, it's a luxury. I agree with the union members that I don't want binding arbitration in Canada. I want free collective bargaining. Unions are still valid groups. They have brought us many, many advantages over the years. And with so many companies contracting out, it feels as if union membership is just dwindling away. So I support the striking, the work stoppage. I support them.
Lynn, if you're not able to get another flight, what are you going to do?
It's a luxury. I either go and have fun with my cousins, or I stay here in Victoria and have fun with my friends. Those people, their wages and the work that they're doing on the ground and not being paid for is an issue for me that it's not a hardship. It's not a hardship with me.
And lastly, Lynn, I appreciate your time. If an agreement has been reached in whatever capacity where the flight attendants vote for it and they're being paid more for for the work that they're doing, and that costs you more in a ticket, are you okay with that?
Yes, we have to pay the true price of things.
All right.
Yes.
Lynn, I appreciate your call. Lynn in Victoria, thank you very much. John-Henry, interesting that we're hearing, wondering about, I think some people wondering perhaps travelers who have initially said that they support the striking flight attendants, but the more this drags on and the more people are inconvenienced, how long do you think that support might last?
Well, I think that it's more common. What I heard from Lynn is actually more common than we think. And there's a huge support when people realize that one of the key issues is that flight attendants aren't being paid for a lot of work that we see them doing. When we see them helping us board, when we see them helping us in the airport, when we see them when we're deplaning, all that work that's unpaid, I don't think any Canadian thinks the government should force workers to be unpaid. And that's what's happening. The government is working on behalf of a private corporation, on behalf of Air Canada. So it's really refreshing to hear callers like Lynn, because it is true, like it's going to be an inconvenience for people, but we are talking about all of our rights as workers that are on the line here. And Section 107 has made this strike illegal, but I would argue that the government of Canada acted way too soon. I don't think they should order people back to work anyway, but they've been on strike for about 12 hours. And all of a sudden, the convenience of me going on vacation is put above workers' fundamental charter rights. And that doesn't make any sense. And it's a really slippery slope. The government could just start ordering us that we can't leave our jobs. And we know we don't get unemployment insurance when we quit our jobs now. So all those freedom folks should really be concerned about this.
We're discussing the Air Canada flight attendants strike. They're defying back-to-work orders. Is this affecting you as a traveler? Do you have someone in your life who's trying to get home, trying to book another flight? Let us know. Give us a call now, 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Janet, and they're coming in now, Doug and Janet. We appreciate those emails. I'll read them in a moment. We're joined by John-Henry Harter. Before we get back to you, John, I want to go to a call. Gord is in Winlaw. Gord, what do you make of what the flight attendants are doing?
I think I'm supporting them. I've worked union my whole life, and I can't see how the government can order them to go back to work. We have a fundamental right to fair bargaining and the process of having a good contract. So I'm definitely supporting the flight attendants. Keep it up.
Gord, are you planning to travel? Do you have someone who's being affected by this?
No, I don't. But, hey, we got to support our unions.
Gord, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. John-Henry Harter with Labor Studies at SFU. Can you clarify something for us? We've heard this, I've heard it from different places. When the union talks about unpaid work, until the wheels are actually moving on there, based on your experience, is that an industry standard or is Air Canada an outlier for that?
My understanding, because I looked into this too, is that it might be the case for WestJet as well. And I got to tell you, I'm not an expert on their collective agreements, but my understanding is that that's not uncommon for other airlines, particularly in Canada. Worldwide, Dan, I honestly just have to say don't know.
Not a problem. Janet emails us a question for you, John-Henry. Are the workers covered by workers' compensation if they're injured during the hours for which they are not paid? If so, would they not by extension be eligible for pay?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would have to say, okay, so I have to stress that I'm not a lawyer.
Okay. We've had a lot of guests say that recently.
I do think that they are eligible for workers' comp because they are signing into work. They are literally on the job. And that's the most disturbing thing about this. They're on the job, they're on the clock, and they're not getting paid for it. So I think, the answer is yes. I believe they would be eligible for workman's comp.
If there is a lawyer out there who knows the actual letter of the law, and John-Henry, appreciate making a valiant attempt. If there is a lawyer out there that's listening and knows the law better than John and myself, feel free to email us now, bctoday@cbc.ca, or call us in, or call in 604-669-3733. On that note, John-Henry, Doug emailed us from Victoria wondering, and this is just in part, he says, what do Air Canada's executives earn per hour when they are not in the air? Equal pay for equal work. We know we hear this among other labor disputes when there is a comparison between a non-union executive and unionized staff. And they're not always an equal or fair comparison. But it is a strategy, isn't it, that you mention how much an executive is making versus, for in this case, a flight attendant who their union says is not being paid for critical work.
So my understanding is that the base salary, bonuses, stock options for the CEO of Air Canada in 2023 was over $12 million.
It is a big organization that would, and you can more than likely you would hear people say, perhaps those people who work in the executive realm, a big organization like this and a profitable organization needs to have appropriate compensation for somebody with the level of expertise to run a large organization like this. I want to get to calls. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
Well, to be fair, Dan, yes, people will say that, but I would argue that our safety is in those flight attendants' hands, and they deserve, for a $22 billion revenue company, they deserve to be compensated fairly for all the time they're working. And we all know that $12 million versus a first-year flight attendant making around $35,000, and that's kind of high, is outrageous.
Let's go to the lines again. Gunder, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is in Shuswap. What do you make of what's happening, Gunder?
Well, I'm a little upset about what's going on with these flight attendants. Here we got a country who's led by a billionaire whose minister ordered people back to work, like that fellow just said, that make $35 grand a year. It's ridiculous. Just pay these people and let's get on with our lives.
Are you affected by this? Gunder, do you have family members or friends who are affected by the strike?
Of course I do. Everybody's affected by the strike. But we got to stick with these people. If we don't have the bottom, we have no foundation for the top. It makes no sense.
Gunder and Shuswap, we appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Jeanette in Duncan. Jeanette, what do you make of what's happening with the flight attendants in Air Canada?
Well, I'm sorry that they're on strike, but I'm 100% behind them. The flight attendants not going back and their QP leaders saying, yeah, I'll go to jail for it. I'm BCGEU, and I want all unions to come forward and stand with the flight attendants. I also want you to not forget the transit workers here in Duncan. They've been on strike since September. Nobody seems to be paying attention to them. My union, we've got a 0.5% offer so far. Canada Post turned down 13%. We need to pay attention to people because without unions, nobody gets paid well. So yay on QP. I'm totally with the flight attendants, and I agree with the previous caller. We're all affected. Everybody deserves decent wages, and their wages and work for free is appalling, as well as we have the $12 million for the high ups. It's time to change this, people. And good on them. I hope it solves itself soon.
All right. Jeanette, can I ask you one question? You remember the BCGEU. You're negotiating with the provincial government right now. Can I ask how that's going?
Well, we're not hearing very much. In fact, I had to reach out and ask, were we in negotiations or was it next year? Apparently, we've had a change in leadership there. I have to say, as a long-time, very pro-union person with persons who've fought for unions in my family for decades, I'm sitting back going, geez, I hope this isn't a sign of things to come. Unions are critically important. So, yeah, I'm not hearing a lot from my union. And I'd like them to stand up in solidarity with other unions, such as the transit workers and the flight attendants. We need to become way more visible, and we need to show our leadership.
All right. Jeanette, appreciate your call. John-Henry Harter, I want to put another email to you. Trevor emailed us to say, your guest is, and this is just his interpretation, your guest is purely only talking about vacationers. What about the people that rely on travel? And essentially, flight attendants are an important position and definitely deserve to be paid every hour. I believe Air Canada has already agreed to give them this. The flight attendants want a 100% raise. That's ridiculous for a job that does not need any schooling. I'm not clear if it doesn't need any schooling. There will be people who will be very inconvenienced. We heard from a woman who was waiting for cancer treatment trying to fly from Prince George to Vancouver, and she was very upset, John. So to clarify, it isn't just vacationers, right?
Yeah, fair. And I understand, I think what I'm hearing Trevor ask about, and that's true, that's a really good point. It is not just vacationers. And I just want to reverse the onus onto Air Canada executives. All they need to do is sit down and bargain. So I'm not suggesting, nor is CUPE suggesting, that Air Canada has to do X, Y, and Z. They're saying Air Canada needs to sit down and bargain with them freely. That's what they want, and that's what the government of Canada is interfering with. So they're not imposing. CUPE has what they're bringing to the bargaining table, and Air Canada has what they're bringing. That's fair. That's collective bargaining. So this could stop. This could end with Air Canada executives, with their negotiators sitting down at the table with CUPE and bargaining and saying, okay, Minister, you don't need to do this. We're going to sit down and collectively bargain with our workers.
For those of you on the line, we're going to extend this segment a little past our news break, but let's get one more call in. Wendy in Westminster. Wendy, how are you affected?
I was supposed to fly out on Saturday.
And what are you going to do now?
Well, I phoned in on Friday and waited 4.5 hours to talk to somebody, and they basically advised me to keep my booking, to check in, and that eventually Air Canada would find me a flight. Thinking you never know when the strike is going to end or if it's even going to start at that point. My problem isn't with the striking people. My problem is with Air Canada. Like, they knew this was coming. They knew this was going to happen. And now customers are shut out. I can't call them. I can't change my flight because they've literally taken it off. Like, it doesn't exist anymore. When I phoned in today, they basically said to me, your flight isn't within 48 hours. Well, yeah, because now the only flight I have is the one coming home. I have no recourse. I was told not to cancel my booking, that they would eventually find me a flight, so I didn't cancel it. I don't have any way to get to where I'm going. I haven't had a vacation in 13 years. I really needed this. Mental health-wise, I needed this vacation. And now I have no recourse with Air Canada because they won't talk to me.
Wendy, really appreciate your call. It sounds like you're in a difficult situation and probably mirroring what a lot of people are feeling. John-Henry Harter, stay with us. We're going to take a break in just a moment. We will continue this segment past the news break. Please, if you're on the line, Barrie and Victoria, stay with us. We will get to you. You are listening to BC Today on CBC Radio 1. Now, after this frazzled weekend, thousands of passengers stranded around the world because of the labor disruption. It's unclear at the moment when Air Canada flights will resume. The airline announced yesterday it planned to resume flights this evening, but the union representing those Air Canada flight attendants saying the members would remain on strike. Gabor Lukács is the president of the nonprofit advocacy group Air Passenger Rights. He spoke with the Early Edition earlier and says Air Canada is failing in its obligation to attend to stranded customers.
Under the air passenger protection regulations, Air Canada has an obligation to rebook passengers not just on its own flights, but also on competitor airlines. The law says the next available flight on any carrier, and that literally means any carrier. What we have seen is that passengers received emails from Air Canada falsely and fraudulently telling them that Air Canada is unable to rebook them. And many of these passengers then found that there were tickets there were seats available on flights of other airlines. Just Air Canada refused or failed to rebook them on those flights. We see passengers currently stranded in Europe and outside Canada because Air Canada is refusing to obey the law with respect to rebooking passengers. And that is the government's fault. The government has the tools and should be using the tools to uphold the law and force Air Canada to actually rebook passengers on competitor airlines if it is business class. That's what the law says. Now it's time that the government uphold the law.
That is Air Canada air passenger rights advocate Gabor Lukács. He's the president of the nonprofit advocacy group Air Passenger Rights, claiming that Air Canada is failing in its obligation to attend to stranded workers. And we're going to continue this segment here on BC Today. You're listening to us on Radio 1, watching us on CBC television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Again, our top story, Air Canada flight attendants remain behind picket lines this morning. Much more in our next half hour. We'll continue with your calls and emails. Let's go to a news break now with Tarnjeet Parmar.
Good afternoon. The union representing 10,000 flight attendants at Air Canada says that their strike will continue. That is in defiance of the Canada Industrial Relations Board, which today ordered an end to the job action by 9 o'clock this morning Pacific time. The CIRB has declared the strike unlawful after the federal government invoked Section 107 of the Labor Code to force the two sides into binding arbitration. CUPE National President Mark Hancock says the right to strike is protected by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. A wildfire that forced a brief evacuation in the Okanagan is now being held, and evacuees have been told that they are allowed to return home. The BC Wildfire Service says the fire just south of Vernon is projected to remain in its current perimeter, measuring about 1 square kilometer in size. The city of Vernon says online that the fire is no longer growing and Highway 97 is fully reopened. And firefighters in Chilliwack are reminding homeowners to make sure that they have working smoke alarms following a fire this morning. Crews responded to a single-family home on Williams Street near Riverside Drive at around 8 o'clock. Everybody inside was able to get out, but one person was treated for smoke inhalation. The fire department says the cause is still under investigation. Those are your news headlines. For more information, you can go to the website, cbc.ca/BC.
Thank you very much, Tanjit Parmar, in our CBC Vancouver newsroom. Again, our top story, we're going to continue this for a little bit longer. Air Canada flight attendants remaining defiant, saying they will not go back to work despite an order from the Canada Industrial Relations Board saying that strike is unlawful. Our guest is John-Henry Harter with Labor Studies at SFU. Lots of calls. Let's get back to them. Barry is in Victoria. Barry, what do you make of what's happening?
Well, I'm a retired Air Canada employee, and I just find what the company's doing very, very disgusting. I have read that they have taken left airplanes wherever they have left them, flown the pilots home on whomever, and left the flight attendants to bear their own costs to get back to their own base. And over the years, flight attendants have not been paid for time that the airplane's not flying. I remember having flight attendants sitting in my base in Kelowna for 4 or 5 hours because we have a maintenance or weather problem, and they're not getting paid. And I've always thought that is just so poor on everybody's part. So I'm in full support of the flight attendants, and I hope they get what they want.
All right, Barry, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. We appreciate you bringing that experience and perspective to us. John-Henry Harter, I saw you nodding along there. Anything you want to respond to?
I'd like to say I'm really impressed with all the callers, and Canadians are really generous people, and I think they understand this issue as one of Air Canada, which is generating like over $25 billion last year in revenue, not in profit, can afford to pay their workers fairly. And the sense of a lack of justice, a lack of fairness is resonating with Canadians. And I know it's anecdotal, Dan, but you and I can both hear caller after caller, even people who have tickets, and Wendy, who hasn't been on vacation in 13 years, is saying Air Canada needs to do better. So I'm really happy at the response of Canadians. I'm really unhappy about the situation, but it seems all your callers are completely able to understand that Air Canada needs to do better, and they're not falling into the trap of blaming the workers.
Let's go to Deb in the Kootenays. Deb, thanks for calling us. What's your reaction to what's happening?
Well, I think it's pretty amusing because the CIRB called it an unlawful strike just after a few hours. Of course, Air Canada doesn't have to bargain in good faith because they know Ottawa is going to give them a safety net, as they did with Canada Post. That has to stop, and these companies have to be forced to bargain in good faith.
Yeah.
We appreciate the call, Deb. John Henry, we heard from Labour Minister Patty Hajdu that after speaking with both sides, and when she called on the Canada Industrial Relations Board to ask both sides, or to impose binding arbitration and order them back to work, saying that they were so far apart that this seemed to be the only solution. What do you think about that?
Wow. I don't buy it. And I think what I just heard Deb, the last caller, say is really important. The government is setting a precedent with the postal workers and with port workers before that, and now with this Air Canada thing, is that executives of major corporations can just sit back and not bargain in good faith. Because legally, it's not just about collective bargaining. Deb had it right. That language is absolutely correct. You have to bargain in good faith, not sit back and wait for the government to force your employees back to work. And I honestly think that's what's happening. That's the message that's being sent to CEOs, to executives is, hey, don't worry about it. You do not have to bargain properly and actually give and take like you would in a bargaining process. You don't have to bargain in good faith because we will force your employees back to work for you. This is a really dangerous precedent that's been happening over the past couple of years.
Let's go to the other side of the country now. Tabassum, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is joining us from Fredericton, New Brunswick. Tabassum, what's your situation?
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, I'm calling from all the way from the other coast. So me and my family, first of all, I want to say that we are in total support. We stand with the CUPE members. We are totally supporting the flight attendants. The only thing I want to say is that from our own experience, my parents and I, we had booked from many months ago a flight with Air Canada on Thursday, August 21st, to go to Dubai, from Fredericton to Dubai, to visit our family members after more than 4 years. It's super frustrating to see that all plans have changed, but one thing that I want to mention is that all the customers, I believe, should stand in solidarity and in support with flight attendants, because Air Canada is not respecting their own flight attendants and their own employees. How can we expect that they respect us as the customers? I was checking the flight status of the flight that we are supposed to be on in 4 days for Monday today, and they were keeping it with on-time status until 2 hours ago. So they were not even respecting customers and travelers who have booked flights for today. They're keeping them in total uncertainty, and they are only announcing that, okay, your flight is canceled 10 hours before the flight. So what should they do? And with that being said, I had to figure, I was not able to sleep overnight because I was following the news and I was trying to figure out an alternative plan to cancel the flights. And me and my parents, we will no longer book anything with Air Canada until we ensure that every single flight attendant is feeling satisfied with their situation.
Tabassum, really appreciate your call. Thank you very much from the other side of the country. A good perspective there, and all the best as you try and travel. We're going to be wrapping up this segment shortly. We want to get to Jim waiting on the line in the Thompson Valley. Jim, what do you make of what's happening?
Well, I don't classify Air Canada as an essential service unless they're the only service to fly to remote communities where there's a need for transportation. I believe the government is in a bit of a conflict of interest situation, as they're the arbitrator, and they receive tax revenues from Air Canada and potentially have shares from this former Crown Corporation in CPP. So I'm sure they would like to get the money flowing again. And also I would suggest that people should not fly with airlines where the workers are in a strike position. Or some sort of dispute. Somebody should develop an app for that, so some people can, look at an app to see if there's a strike position, whether or not they should buy airline tickets with such a company. So those are my points.
Right. Jim, what would you say? And John-Henry Harter, you brought this up before. Sometimes, for some Canadians, Air Canada is the only option, depending on where they live, and they may be traveling not for a vacation, not for a pleasant visit, but for essential medical reasons, for bereavement, that kind of thing. What do you say to that?
Well, this is where I think there needs to be some sort of app where people can look at all the airlines, see which ones are where there are workers in a strike position, and maybe make another choice in the purchase of their tickets. If there must be other alternatives for transportation available, unless it's a remote community where there's no highways, no trains, no other airlines flying. I hope that answers your question.
Mm-hmm. Jim, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Just as we wrap up, John-Henry Harter, I want to put a question, an email to you. Ken emailed us from Vernon, and the subject is hypocrisy. And he says, in part, I suspect many of the same callers supporting the union will be the same ones calling in to complain about the cost of living rising. In this case, notably the cost of air travel. Quote, workers always have a choice. If you don't like where you're working, find work elsewhere. This is the ultimate means of registering your opposition. Any response to what Ken says?
That's a tired old right-wing talking point that if you don't like your job, you can just leave. So let's say you work at a fast food restaurant for minimum wage. You don't like it, you can leave to another fast food restaurant where you work for minimum wage. If for Air Canada flight attendants who have a very specific set of skills that are really important, not just for serving food and stuff, but for actual health and safety reasons, if they go to another airline, they're going to run into the same issues. I would argue that if you run a $25 billion company, you should pay your workers properly. I just don't buy into that. If you don't like it, you could quit. Most of us can't afford to quit our jobs, and I don't think that's a good faith argument. Do people complain about prices? Sure. But I heard all those callers saying, I stand with the workers, and some of them, even with your questioning, Dan, said, yeah, it is going to be inconvenient. And I think one call even suggested they would pay more for a flight. And I think they said that you have to pay the true cost of things. We can't keep thinking that we can consume, and not pay workers properly. I think that's just ideologically, I completely disagree with that email, but I don't think it's a good faith argument either.
John-Henry Harter, a lecturer in labor studies at SFU. We really appreciate your time on a busy day. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Take care.
And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Well, many of you emailed and called and shared messages on our TikTok page. We really appreciate it. I'm sorry I can't read all of them. Here are a few of them from one TikToker in Toronto who says the whole airline industry in Canada is backwards. Not surprised about Air Canada's troubles. Josh Up 100 says, I'm always with the people doing the work. We are all tired of being exploited. We all sympathize. Railroader says, time to change the industry standards if it is. And that would be reference to the union saying that they don't get paid for work that when the plane is actually not moving. K Marek Rocks 1.ca says they're not getting paid for time and work they do. They deserve it. Sky writes, I agree, pay airline stewards and postal workers what they deserve. Others say, yes, Unifor stands in solidarity with the flight attendants. We did see other unions, including BCGEU and Unifor, out there on the front lines. I'm just going to read one more email here. So another person concerned about the federal government's role in this, saying the federal government, in part, the federal government support of Air Canada is in ordering the workers back to work strikes me as a Canada kowtowing to foreign interests, saying that Air Canada is mostly owned, mostly American-owned. Quote, this is nonsense. We need to support Canadian workers. We'll read more of these emails on Air Canada and the situation tomorrow on our show. You're listening and watching BC Today. Well, people who depend on sockeye salmon in BC are celebrating a massive estimated return of fish to the Fraser River. An estimated 6.3 million sockeye are expected back in the province's largest river. That is up from 2.3 million preseason estimate from the Pacific Salmon Commission and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. We're asking you, what do you make of this huge sockeye return? What does it say about the health of the fish and the environment, the waters they travel to? Call us now across the province, 1-800-825-5950. The number in Metro Vancouver is 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be hands-free or pulled over if you're driving or behind the wheel of or handle of something. Email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Those massive estimated returns were part of data shared last week as part of a group of organizations, including the BC Seafood Alliance. The Alliance's Executive Director, Christina Burridge, is here with us now. Hello, Christina.
Hello there. Good to be here.
Good to have you. Thank you. Also joining us is the chair of the First Nation Wild Salmon Alliance, Chief Bob Chamberlin, elected chief of the Kwikwasana'atuk Hakwamish First Nation on BC Central Coast. Chief, forgive me if I did not pronounce that correctly. I did my absolute best with the pronunciation I was able to find.
Well, thank you. I'm the previous elected
chief. There we are.
So you get a good effort, though.
Well thank you very much. I will practice and get better. Chief, first to you. Why are the estimated sockeye returns so high, as far as you know?
Well, I look back to the Cohen Commission because it was a 3-year commission that examined every aspect of what the stressors and impacts were to the Fraser sockeye specifically. And I think about what they were identified as, like urban development hasn't changed, industrial activities like logging and mining continue, agriculture impacts and water withdrawals continue, and certainly climate change hasn't changed other than to get worse. So in my mind, I turn and look at what was reported there that has changed, and that's the removal of open net pen fish farms from coastal BC waters, and of course the Big Bar landslide response from DFO. And these are the two big reasons. And I put a lot of weight in the removal of open net pen fish farms to this return.
And we know you've been part of that effort to make that happen as well. Christina Burridge, what do you make of these estimated returns?
Well, Bob could certainly be right, although I am at this point not entirely convinced that the science says that this is causation rather than correlation. I think the thing that we haven't talked about is that ocean conditions have changed dramatically. So from about 2013 through 2017 or so, we saw the North Pacific blob, which went from Mexico to Alaska, and where water temperatures warmed by about 3% Celsius, and had huge effects on the salmon that go to the Gulf of Alaska for their grow-out stage, both from BC and from Southeast Alaska. And those water temperatures have cooled off considerably. And so the Fraser sockeye that go there have more food in their juvenile and midlife stages. And so that, to my mind, is a significant factor in the return.
Mm. We have an email, and I'll put it to both of you, from Kathy, who says, what effect did COVID have on the traditional food, sport, and commercial sockeye fishery in 2021? Perhaps it might have been a year or around COVID. Chief, do you have any response to that first?
Well, I'm not sure about COVID, but I know in 2021 is when the salmon returned. Mm-hmm. And here we are 4 years later, and they're coming back in great numbers. We have to be mindful that they would have hatched from the eggs in the spring of 2022. They would have left the rivers in the 2023 and then returned back this year. And at the time of the outmigration, which is the most critical time for juvenile salmon, because they're very tiny, very susceptible to impacts, the Discovery Islands fish farms were removed. So there's no disease, pathogen, bacteria, sea lice, at the most critical time of their life cycle. And so now we see a great return. And we have to be mindful, 90% of all the salmon that leave Fraser River go through Discovery Islands. So for me, I know it's the removal of the farms as well as other repairs to natural events like Big Bar that are the reason we're enjoying this bounty today.
And we should remind people the Big Bar landslide 2019 cut off a massive run. And we've seen and remember those images of workers trying to clear and First Nations as well, trying to clear out that landslide and moving salmon physically through that pinch point. Let's go to the lines now. Jenny is joining us, I believe, from Saltaire. Jenny, what do you think?
Yes, hi. I was listening to the interview, but my point is that I see a lot of fishermen in the Port Alberni Valley. There's trucks there and trailers all day long filling the parking lots of the marina there. And I understand that Alberni is the salmon capital of the world for fishing. But it also made me very angry the other day that they're out there for recreational reasons, as men, as spending their money, just having a good day. That's killing a fish for recreational reasons. And then my friend said, oh, no, that's just a little dot in the whole killing of the fish scheme, because there's huge schooners out there killing lots of fish. And of course, I didn't really want to hear that. But basically, my point, I just wish they wouldn't do that. I wish they wouldn't go out for their own recreational reasons just to kill our nature. If they're using it for food, yes, that's great. You get a free fish. But really, you can go down to the supermarket and buy a fish pretty cheap. So I don't understand why they have to spend all that money on big trucks and trailers and boats and gas. And it's just a lot of wasted money as far as I'm concerned, because I'm a poor person and they could just maybe put their money towards better things to help the environment and such. So I'm glad that the salmon are returning, and I understand that, you know, they have a big life cycle, and I'm glad that the Fraser River is healthy enough to accept them. But these fishermen should just do something else. You know, do something else. Go skip in your backyard if you've got the energy, or do something that doesn't kill the environment. Thank you.
Jenny, thank you very much for your call. We could hear your frustration with recreational fishing, though that is part of some communities' economic well-being. Christina, Burridge, for the agencies and the groups that you represent, how significant, what's the mood among the fish processors and the businesses that rely on this animal?
Well, we're absolutely thrilled by the size of the return. And some of my people were fishing in Johnstone Strait over the weekend, and they reported absolutely huge sightings of fish jumping up and down, almost jumping into their boat. So we actually think that the run is going to end up at something more like 11, 12 million.
Really?
So yes, which would be the largest in recent history for sure. So our disappointment is that, generally speaking, we're not actually allowed to harvest that abundance and provide food for British Columbians in the world, mainly because I think DFO is fixed on a model that says those fish should not be there, but they are there, and we should be fishing them at a modest level.
I want to go for its part. Department of Fisheries and Oceans told CBC News, given this abundance, that First Nations fisheries for food, social, and ceremonial purposes are given first priority to fish, and further opportunities for the nations, as well as commercial and recreational facilities, will be assessed as more information on the salmon returns is collected. Christina, is there a point at which you think you can say, okay, the run is solid, we have a lot of fish, more than we expected, can we please go out and fish more?
I think we got to that point about the middle of last week. And so we're disappointed that we're here on Monday and we're not seeing much movement. It is clear from the test fisheries that take place that these are the late run Sockeye, which is part of the Fraser River, is going to be significantly bigger than expected. So there are opportunities there, but there will be a downside if those fish go up the river without some harvest on them.
Let's go to Tyrone and Agassiz. Tyrone, you're out on the water. That's how you make your living. What's it like?
This year was a surprise to all of us. We were expecting some sockeye return, but not nearly in the numbers that they did. So it really caught us off guard to actually get our fill for a change, because we really haven't had our fill for a number of years now.
And where do you fish on the Fraser?
About 2 miles upstream from Hope.
And it's been impressive?
It's been impressive, not only in terms of numbers, but I noticed since people like Bob Chamberlin and others have been moving to get the open net pen fish farms out of the migratory route, that the salmon have come back stronger and stronger. For years, they'd hit my net and just, bounce once and just sit there. But now they hit, they fight, they break through, they break the net and keep. They have so much energy. They're so resilient, and I feel confident that the work that Bob and others have done to get those impediments out of the way are the number one reason why they're not only the numbers are so good, but they're such a healthier fish than they were even 5 and 10 years ago.
Tyrone, really appreciate your call. Thank you very much, and best of luck, and stay safe out on the water. Chief Bob Chamberlin, what do you make of what Tyrone is saying, and perhaps some of the caution, if we can call it that DFO is putting on this run?
Well, first off, to the comments from your other guest, or the question you posed about the First Nation access first after conservation, that's Supreme Court law. Mm-hmm. So that is what the government must abide by. And we have to understand what salmon mean to First Nations across the province. I mean, coastal British Columbia, right up to the very headwaters. It's the basis of our culture and our traditions. And so when people like Tyrone and others are able to pass on the knowledge that they hold to their grandchildren, we're talking about what the Truth and Reconciliation Commission spoke of in terms of setting a place where our traditions and cultures can be strengthened and rebound from the Indian residential school experience that was thrust upon our people. So there's many layers to the benefit of salmon. And I really want to see our Prime Minister, Carney, invest in wild salmon as a nation-building project, because we would accomplish not only reconciliation across the province, food security for First Nation communities, benefits to the environment, benefits to commercial fishermen, sport fishermen, and wilderness tourism. To me, it is an activity that he could pursue that would simply benefit almost every corner of British Columbia and accomplish so many political and legal commitments that they've made.
We appreciate both of your time and your expertise and perspective. We have to wrap it up there. Chief Bob Chamberlin, Chair of the First Nation Wild Salmon Alliance, and Christina Burridge, Executive Director of the BC Seafood Alliance. All the best. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's it for our show. Thank you for calling in and joining the discussion. And there were a lot of emails. You can always email us again, bctoday@cbc.ca.